Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is Wednesday, March 11th, 2020. Thank you so much for joining me. Title of today's podcast is Bailouts in Public Health. So front and center is going to be a discussion on coronavirus, the public health implications that, of course, that we are in the midst of globally and economically, the effects that it's having on market performance the world over, what it's already done, what's likely to transpire. The president gave an announcement from the Oval Office this evening at 9 p.m., about a 10-15 minute speech, if you will. We'll do a little bit of analysis on that. What are some of the implications? What are the futures markets doing now at the time of this podcast? And what's likely, simply like I said, to transpire as we continue to navigate our way through this public health issue, through the war on oil that we discussed briefly yesterday. Again, I don't know how long I'm going to do this podcast, again, trying to preserve my voice a little bit, so maybe a little bit shorter than usual, but nevertheless. And now the issue of bailouts, because this is what it is. Now, of course, it's going to be called fiscal stimulus coming from governments the world over. There were a couple big announcements this evening also from Australian Prime Minister as to what the Australians are going to be doing from a fiscal standpoint, which is quite large. Not surprising, and it's quite telling because a lot of it is even going to continue into the following year. So something that appears that might peak in regards to the coronavirus might peak over the next few months. Well, the Aussies are saying, well, no, we're going to continue with our fiscal stimulus well into next year. So what do they know that the rest of us don't know? Or, what I should say, people that don't pay attention to this audience, what don't they know? Because we know what's taking place. We know what's going on. We know what's going on in the land down under. They've skirted a recession for nearly 3 decades, and it's very likely that they're going to be heading into one in the near future, if they're not already in one as we speak. So a little bit of the analysis, with the bailouts. Does it really make sense? Is this quote-unquote stimulus actually going to stimulate, or is it just going to be like shooting a blank? Is it just going to be a big dud? Also, what are central banks going to continue to do? So a lot to discuss, but before I do, I missed my opportunity yesterday, and of course I was out sick for the past week or so, so I missed a birthday wish to my Yaya, so I wanted to make sure I said happy birthday to her. Last year, of course, was the beginning of the Capital News, and started in February, so I had a very small audience at that time. Not that we have a great audience yet, but it's growing and it's larger, so now a bigger shout out for my Yaya to wish her a very happy belated birthday. I haven't even seen her yet because I've been sick. I self-quarantine, people, whether it's the coronavirus or anything else. I don't know if it was a cold, if it was an allergy, whatever it was, it makes no difference to me. I self-quarantine. I don't need the president, the vice president, the director of CDC or NIH to come out and tell me to self-quarantine if I'm sick. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't got to worry about it. I stay out of your hair. I'm not sneezing on you. I'm not coughing on you. I'm not kissing you, shaking your hands. None of that. Go in my room. I stay there. Nobody has to bother me. And I don't have to bother anybody. That's how I like it. That's how I do it. Okay? And to my Yaya, you want to understand why I'm so pretty, you got to look at her. I have fantastic genes. So that's it. We love you, Yaya. Many more. We'll be seeing you here shortly. So to some of the market performance, a big down day across the board globally, and it appears with the futures markets, even given the comments from Donald Trump this evening, they're continuing to sell off. One of the key points that the president noted in his speech was that all travel from Europe to the United States is going to be banned for 30 days. Okay, so we'll take a step back here and talk more broadly about the speech. I think the speech was decent. I'm sure I'll watch it again or see some clips of it tomorrow. It was not, I don't think it rose to the occasion. I think it was I don't want to necessarily say too late, but it definitely should have been done sooner. And I have stressed this here on many occasions. This is a public health issue. Put yourself in a win-win situation. Get out as early as possible. Because if you do so, it's a win-win situation, at least from the optics, at least politically speaking, because you can at least say to the American people, give them the confidence that the government is on top of it, we're handling it, we know what this can potentially turn into, We hope it doesn't, but we are preparing for the worst. And if nothing happens, if the president, like he says, I have a hunch, it's going to be nothing, the numbers are going to be this, that, the other, if that proves to be the case and it's a nothing burger, fantastic. At least you said public health is first and foremost. Human life is first and foremost, whether it's preventing somebody from dying, preventing somebody from getting sick, transmitting it. We, the U.S. government, are on top of it. We're going to do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Here's how we're going to do it. Look like a leader. Look like a man in charge. 2 weeks ago, if it was already, President Trump was at the White House in the press room. 15 cases here in the United States. Everybody's going to be fine. Nobody's going to die. Well, here we are today. We have 1,000 cases across the country, and over 24 people have passed away. This takes us right back to what, ladies and gentlemen? Say the word with me. You ready? Credibility. Credibility. You can't do this. You can't say this. You cannot have a hunch. You can't have a feeling. You have to go with the science. Now, I don't know if Donald Trump seriously thought that this was going to be nothing. If he thought, you know what, I can't allow this to cause a ruckus within the markets, so I'm just going to downplay everything. If he doesn't pay attention to what he's being told by some of the professional doctors and scientists around him, a combination of all of them. But all of that is unacceptable. All he had to do was step forward, give his Oval Office meeting or speech a few weeks ago. Say, we are on top of it. Here's what we're going to do. If it turned into something more, well, then you already have that plan in place. And now it's just simply, everybody get on board. We told you this was a possibility. Let's do everything as a country together, not Republican, not Democrat, not a partisan issue, to prevent the spread of this virus, of which there is no therapy, of which there is no yet to date vaccine. Now, the president did call for some unity. It was about time, at least here in the United States. However, he threw a jab. He threw an uppercut. He threw a right cross at Europe. He did. And I said, again, initially in my first go through with the speech, I said, don't do that, Mr. President. Make this a unifying thing, because he's basically saying, the epicenter was out of China. So sort of blaming, for the lack of a better word, China and also the Europeans, and sort of patting himself on the back for shutting down travel from China into the United States as early as he did. But was that even early enough? Because he did that in January. And we know that this virus came about in China in November. So there's already a couple months of this going on before the president said, okay, well, Nelly, we got to shut this down. So was it early? Yes, it was, relative to what other countries did. But was it as soon as they knew about it? Probably not. Because I do imagine that the United States government, some sort of intelligence service or somebody, had to know what was going on in China to some degree, okay? But then the president again went after Europe and said, Europe should have shut down travel to China just like I did. Should have done it earlier, because a lot of people contracted it in Europe, and they brought it here to the United States. So I don't know if this is now the president's attempt to perhaps start switching the narrative to, hey, I did everything to juice this economy. I did everything to make it the greatest economy ever. I did everything to get the stock market to record all-time highs. I did everything to get unemployment at 50-year lows. This is the damn Chinese and the Europeans' fault, not mine. I cut the travel off. I did. I don't know. I wouldn't put it past him, because we know he has hinged basically his credibility, his legacy, his presidency on the performance of the stock market. Well, we are basically in bear market territory from that technical media definition of 20% down from an all-time or from a recent high. We meet that threshold, and with the futures markets, if they continue this way tomorrow, that's most definitely going to be the case. Now, the speech, I don't think, did a good enough job at really explaining everything and giving a lot of details. And we know this to be the case, at least to some extent, because shortly after the speech, the president even tweeted following up, because there was some confusion, well, what do you mean a ban on European travel? And he clarified that it was just restricted to people, not to goods. So there's going to be trade back and forth, but there's not going to be people traveling back and forth. There's also an exemption, for whatever reason, not fully understood at this juncture either, that exempts the UK. So we can go to the UK, the UK can come here, whatever. I don't know if that's a loophole for people from other countries to travel to the UK, then to come to the US. I don't know. So those are some of the details that are missing. And I think when you have this type of moment in the Oval Office, you have to have your ducks in a row. You have to dot your I's and cross your T's. But nevertheless, he did it, and I give the president credit for doing so, because I think he's finally at the point, and I think highly reluctantly, that he understands the severity of this. Maybe not necessarily from the potential mortality rate, which we now know from testimony from Dr. Fauci at the NIH, who testified earlier this morning before Congress, that the mortality rate is 10 times more lethal than the common flu. Now, we've known this. We've been discussing this here for a long time, but again, it's not just the mortality rate that one has to focus on. It's those severe cases. It's those severe cases that can overwhelm healthcare systems, because if you start to get nurses, other healthcare providers, and doctors sick in the process, then they're going to be out of commission, and they're not going to be able to go around in treating other people who don't have the virus, because they're going to spread it to them. So this is the type of compounding problem that it turns into. And then you add on top of that all of the secondary and tertiary effects, especially economically speaking, especially in regards to travel and tourism and entertainment. That's a huge industry globally, especially here in the United States. And what we're learning this evening, there was one reported positive case from an NBA player. So now the NBA is suspending the rest of the NBA season indefinitely. Now, of course, that could pick up, or they might say it's an end of it. I don't know, all of the intricate details of any type of players' union within the NBA. I don't follow it enough or know enough as to if there's a cutoff date under such a situation, because these players might have to have at least 1 or 2 months of an off season before they can start up again. So there might be a window of time as to when this could actually start up again and they can actually finish the season out. So a lot of those questions remain. We know that the NCAA, in regards to March Madness, the college basketball tournament, that no fans allowed. No fans allowed. Just the players, just the teams, referees. That's it. You play the game, you go home. So just think about this. Think about all of the lost revenue from all of those vendors selling all of this sports memorabilia, all of the concessions, the drinks, the food, the alcohol. Think about all of the tourist attractions that may be in these cities where people would also go, museums or whatever else there might be in the cities, other sports attractions, all of the hotels, the lost revenue, the airlines, the bus fares, the train tickets, whatever the case might be, and how you're going to get there. The gasoline spent if you're going to yourself drive your vehicle to one of these cities. All of that's gone. It's gone, and it's not coming back. There is no pent-up demand. This is a once-a-year thing, March Madness. This isn't, it doesn't turn into April Madness and then May Madness and then June Madness. It's March Madness, and that's it. You don't see it until next year. Same thing with a lot of the upcoming St. Patrick's Day parades and other events. We're starting to see those getting canceled outright. Outright. So think of all of the bars and the restaurants that are not going to get that revenue because people are not going to be out. At least not to that degree. Now, I imagine, how many people love a reason to drink. So I'm sure there's still going to be people going out for St. Paddy's Day. Excuse me. But nevertheless, that's a lot of lost revenue. And they're not going to get it back. They're just not. Again, we've talked about this weeks ago, because a lot of people have been talking, and I still hear idiots bringing this up, that there's going to be some sort of V-shaped recovery. This is absolute nonsense. There is no thought put into these people whatsoever. If you go to a restaurant, if you eat out a few times a week, and now you cut it down You're not going to buy 3 entrees because you didn't make it out a couple of days before. You're just going to buy 1 dinner and that's it. You're going to go home. You don't make it up. Vacations. If you got a week vacation planned, you're not going to say, oh, well, it got canceled. Now, if we reschedule it, we're going to go on a 2-week vacation. That's not how it works. So there's not going to be any type of V-shaped recovery. Any type of these events that are once a year, that's it. You're not going to make it up. I don't know what people don't understand about this. Could there potentially be pent-up demand for other goods in the interim? Perhaps, but I doubt it. I mean, there's some opportunities here. You know, we got interest rates coming down. Once again, a lot of people have the opportunity to refinance their mortgages. If that can put an extra $100, $200 in your pocket, fantastic. I hope what you do with it is you pay off your other debts, not go spending it on stupid stuff that you don't need. That would be a good thing. That would honestly be the stimulus that we need. People paying down their debts. That's the true stimulus. Reaching into your pockets or into John Q. Public, the taxpayers' pockets, to pay for these things is ridiculous. Excuse me again. So, what the president also noted were some bailouts, were some fiscal measures. Again, nothing in great detail. Some things that can be done at the executive level. Other things need to be done at the congressional level and then signed off by the president. But I just want to put and provide some context here for what we have witnessed over the past few years and where we might be headed in regards to potential bailouts. We've had massive tax cuts, and a lot of this has been targeted to corporations and small businesses. We've had massive regulation cuts or deregulation. A lot of these companies receive direct government subsidies as it is. A lot of these companies, small, medium, and large, are awarded government contracts worth millions, if not billions, of dollars. You have preferential treatment given to some minority-owned businesses. You have preferential treatment given to women-owned businesses. Okay? So where am I going with this? You've been given all of these opportunities to save money, to invest prudently. If you've squandered it, if you've wasted it on share buybacks or on poor investments or XYZ, why is it now my responsibility as a taxpayer to bail you out? The answer is it's not. It's not my responsibility. You've been given a lot of opportunity under the sun. Now, is this a one-off? Is this something that is extremely rare? Yeah, it is. But that, in my opinion, doesn't justify a continuation of bailouts or any type of thing like that. Now, I don't know if it's going to get that severe where they're going to do it. I think it's most definitely a possibility because we know the dominoes are set. We're pretty certain that the bubble has burst. We got the coronavirus, COVID-19. We got the oil war now. We got, everybody, the corporate balance sheets were over-levered to begin with. You had bad risk-taking. You had poor money management decisions via share buybacks that doesn't really offer any type of value to the overall economy or to the shareholder, but it does allow the C-suite, the executives, to pay themselves handsomely, and that's exactly what they did, and to juice the stock market to all-time highs, not off of fundamentals, but off of multiple expansion and off of financial engineering, which we have just witnessed over the past few weeks completely wiped out the quote-unquote growth of the past year. And if we look at some other markets around the world, they've wiped out 2 years of growth, 3 years of growth. I'm not making it up. You can go look this stuff up. So the question is, how much further does this have to go? Now, this audience knows my opinion. I think at minimum we're going back to 2016 levels. At a minimum. And I imagine we'll overshoot that. And depending on how bad the cascade effects are with corporate balance sheets and the consumer balance sheet, it could go a lot lower. But my base case, and I have stated this consistently for over a year now, at least publicly, but privately too, going back to 2016 levels. And some major stock exchanges are already at that level. They're already back to where they were in 2017, some of them back to where they were in 2016. I think it's just a matter of time before it comes here to the United States. Now, the big kicker, the big signal, the big tell, in my opinion, once that starts to happen, is if you really start to see an acceleration of a sell-off in the NASDAQ and in the NASDAQ 100. And the reason I say that is because these guys have been the darlings of Wall Street. Your Microsofts, Facebooks, Apples, Googles, Amazons, Netflix, that type of stuff. If those big boys really start to sell off here, that's it. What leads up typically leads down. So when those guys start to roll over, then that's it. We're going to go to those levels, in my opinion, 2016 and probably beyond. All right? This economy has been built on fluff. This is what happens. The market is always rooting out BS. They found it, and within 3 weeks, they wiped out a year's worth of gains. Okay? Okay? And so, I mean, that's just what happened. That's just what happened. Now, I think the NASDAQ is still not quite there yet. But again, that goes to my point. They're still seen as the darlings of Wall Street despite what's taking place. So they're still seen as somewhat of a safe haven asset, if you will. I think it's just a matter of time before realization steps into them as well. And people say, I got to get out. I got to take my cash. I got to, blah, blah, blah. And then you start to see the bigger selling. And that's when you start to see some of the panic stuff as well. In regards to some balance sheet mess, this takes us right back to Boeing, which is just getting hammered. It's just getting clobbered. And we've been talking about Boeing here for months. And it appears that my spider senses on that were correct. And there's virtually no end in sight because they had their own internal issues to begin with. We already stated that they might have issues with their customers, being the airlines, and now the airlines have major issues because you have travel ban after travel ban after travel ban being instituted. They're not making any money. The business model of an airline doesn't make that much money to begin with. Their margins are tight and they have a lot of debt because they got to buy these airplanes, and these airplanes aren't cheap. So these companies are on life support. That doesn't bode well for Boeing, which just put in a hiring freeze, by the way, and also I think in a overtime hour freeze as well. This doesn't bode well for General Electric, who we warned about months ago when we had Harry Markopoulos come out, a forensic accountant, warn us that they've been doing some fuzzy math for many, many years. That's never been off my radar. I hope you haven't forgotten about it. You got GM, you got Ford. Ford has junk bond status, okay? How much longer are these guys going to stand? Can't go out, can't buy a car, can't afford a car, can't sell anything. People are already defaulting on their auto loans above and beyond where they were a decade ago during the great financial crisis. So this is far from over. You have Wynn, the WYNN, the Wynn Resorts, hotels, casinos. You have Boeing, you have Hilton Hotels, tapped out. They have fully tapped their credit lines. They are on life support. Those are the ones that have been reported, that I have seen. You may be familiar with others, but I can almost guarantee you, ladies and gentlemen, that there are other companies, major corporations, because I'm sure everybody has heard of those companies, Wynn, Boeing, and Hilton, fully tapped out their credit lines. How many more do you think have already done so or are about to do so? Can they remain on life support long enough? Or are they going to cry uncle? Is daddy government going to come bail them out? Who knows? We have the Federal Reserve back in the repo. Well, they never left, but now they're back into the repo markets on overdrive. They're meeting next week. Just the other evening, the Bank of England, or yesterday, Bank of England had an emergency meeting, and they cut their interest rates by 50 basis points. There was an initial uptick in some of the European markets yesterday, but they closed down for the day today as well. We also have, Federal Reserve meeting next week. They will make their decision next Wednesday on the 18th. Markets are already pricing in an additional 75 basis point rate cut. That'll take us down to 0.25 to 0.5%. So where's this going to end, ladies and gentlemen? Where is this going to end? When is it going to stop? And what is this fiscal and monetary policy really going to lead to? It's not going to lead to much of anything. They did this back in '08. They tried to be somewhat proactive on some of this stuff. Of course, it's reactionary, but they're trying to be proactive from other things. Doesn't work. Markets gave back 50%, which we could give back an additional 50% from where we stand today. It's quite possible. Because this market over the past decade has not grown on fundamentals. It has grown on financial engineering. It has grown on fiscal stimulus. It has grown on monetary stimulus. And that's a foundation, a house built on sand. And we had this conversation, I think, last week. Yeah, it might look pretty for a little bit. It might look stable, but when things get choppy, does it stand up to the wind or does it crack? Well, we're starting to see the cracks. And if the bubble has burst, and I do believe that it has, you can't put the air back in the balloon once it bursts. So that's not good. We covered a lot of things I wanted to discuss today. Still want to conserve my voice a little bit. Market performance looks choppy as far as the futures are concerned right now. At the time of this podcast, anything could transpire overnight, but it appears it's going to be another big down day tomorrow. Coronavirus is serious. The cases are going to get worse before they get better, something we have been discussing here for weeks as well. NBA season has been suspended. March Madness is on, but no fans allowed. Oh, and then a little bit of Hollywood trivia here. We have actor Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita Wilson, have contracted the coronavirus, and they are currently in Australia. Now, I'm not certain as to if they contracted it in Australia or if they contracted it in the U.S., but traveled to Australia and they've been tested there. But just a point to note, it is in Australia, and right now it is summer in Australia. Pretty hot down there, and they have it. So the idea that warmer temperatures are going to eradicate this thing, it's possible, but I don't think it holds that much water right now. I hope that's the case, but we do have this virus existing in some pretty warm climates to begin with. So we'll see what happens. We covered a lot. Bailouts and public health. We're going to continue our conversation on this, more analysis, as you expect here at the Capital News. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like, share, subscribe. Leave your comments. We do love hearing from you. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.